Hello students, welcome to Target IAS. This is a part of series of video lectures covering economy related current affairs targeting prelims and mains 2021. This video covers economy related current issues from 5th September till 11th September. Let's begin. This article states that RBI has altered priority sector lending and included certain new categories. Now, what are priority sector lendings? It is a procedure in which banks keep aside certain amount to give as loans for certain priority sectors. Those priority sectors are agriculture, MSMEs, and certain weaker sections or poorer sections of the society. Now, of the amount that banks decide to disburse as loans, certain percentage is kept for priority sector categories. That is 40%. Let me explain. Let's say a bank A wants to give 100 crores as loans to its customers. Of 100 crores, 40%, that is 40 crores is to be given to the priority sectors according to the RBI. So, of all the priority sector categories, agriculture takes the major chunk. So, of 40 crores which are kept aside for priority sector categories, agriculture takes 18%, which means that particular bank should give 18 crores rupees only to agriculture related loans and 10% to the weaker and poorer sections of the society and 7.5% to MSMEs. Now, the overall aim of priority sector lending is to overall development of all the sectors of the economy and not just focus on the financial sector. Now, the news here is RBI has added certain new categories under this priority sector lending. They are banks finances to startups of up to 50 crores. And loans to farmers who are willing to install solar power. So, for solar power installations and startups of up to 50 crores and for setting up of compressed biogas plants. Now, these are the new categories included by the RBI under priority sector lending. Apart from this, RBI also specifies that higher weightage will be given to these identified districts or districts which have low flow of priority sector lending. So, in order to improve credit flow in such identified districts, RBI said that higher weightage is given to priority sector loans under identified districts. Also, weightage is increased or doubled for the loans given to farmer producer organizations and renewable energy, weaker sections or poorer sections, and when to invest in health infrastructure under Ayushman Bharat. So, this article states that RBI not only included new categories under priority sector lending, also increased credit limits to identified districts and renewable energy, poorer sections, farmer producer organizations and health infrastructure under Ayushman Bharat. Coming to the next article, Reserve Bank of India revises audit norms for banks. Now, what are audit norms? Long-term audit norms is a questionnaire given by the RBI to be answered by the auditors. Now, this questionnaire is specifically given to certain branches. They are bank branches that are dealing in foreign exchange, branches that deal in the recovery of NPA, branches that deal in large cash advances, and branches that deal in clear housing operations. Now, these branches are specifically given the LFAR, long-term audit norms, to be filled by their auditors. Now, why does RBI give such questionnaire? In order to identify the gaps and vulnerable areas in banking system, and in order to improve the efficacy of internal audit. Now, according to the revised norms, the questionnaire should be submitted by the auditors as soon as possible. Now, according to the revised norms, banks should submit the copy of LFAR along with note of agenda by the board of directors within 60 days of submission of LFAR by the auditors. Let me simplify a little further. Now, let's say on January 1st, the auditor of a bank submit LFAR or audit norms to the banks. So within 60 days, that is by March 1st, banks should send a copy of this audit norms along with agenda note or the opinion of board of directors to the RBI. This is what that is discussed in this article. Now coming to the next article. This says that government or Union Home Ministry suspend license of 6 NGOs. Of the 6 NGOs, 4 are Christian missionaries. Now the names of the NGOs are given here, but that is not very important. Let us look into the background of what FCRA is. FCRA is Foreign Contribution Regulation Act of 2010. Now, what does this act do? Now, this FCRA Act regulates the acceptance and utilization of foreign funds. Now, any person or association or a company can receive foreign funds, and anybody without an Indian passport can donate funds to these organizations. But the funds, the utilization of these funds should not be detrimental to the national interests. Now, according to the FCRA Act, the contributions can be in the form of cash or any gift articles, and it can be in Indian currency or foreign currency. Now, let us look who all can receive foreign funds under this FCRA Act. Any person or an association or a company which has certain religious or economic or educational or social agenda can receive foreign funds. Now, let me explain this you further. Let's say there is an NGO A. If this NGO undertakes actions related to educational programs, let's say it has certain educational programs to educate rural children, or it has certain programs to improve health in rural India, or it has any religious programs or any economic related programs, then those organizations can be able to receive foreign funds. But before receiving these funds, these organizations should get prior permission from the Union Home Ministry. Now, who all are prohibited from taking foreign funds? Any judge or any government servant or any candidate who is about to stand in elections, contest in elections, or any person or association that have affiliations with a political party, any member of legislature, any member of parliament, a columnist or a cartoonist, editor or a publisher of a newspaper or any telecommunication channel, or any person or organization who deals with broadcast of news or current affairs. All these persons or organizations are prohibited from taking foreign funds. So, because these foreign funds coming from foreign sources may influence the local decisions or policy making, so these persons are prohibited from taking foreign funds. This article discusses the conflict of interest in India's policy makings. Let me explain. Now that Indian economy is under disruption, we need investments, capital to revive our economy. Now that our government is not in a position to spend any further, we need foreign investments in the form of FDI. Now, the increased FDI will increase investments in the economy. Increased investments will increase demand in the economy, thus contributing to the growth of manufacturing sector. Now, we all know that there is a feud going on between the USA and China. So, many companies which are based in China want to move out of China because of two reasons. One, feud with dispute with the United States, and the other is supply chain disruptions because of the pandemic. Now, because of these two reasons, many companies want to move out of China. Now, India can be a potential destination for these companies, but there is a problem. India wants FDI, but India's propaganda of self-reliance. But the problem here is, while we want FDI investments, we are also propagating the concept of self-reliance under Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India initiative. Say, under Make in India initiative, we are stressing for import substitution. For any foreign company to invest in India, we are imposing certain ministries or imposing certain import substitution restrictions, like they should procure certain raw materials from the domestic economy. Now, if certain ministries says to companies, foreign companies, that they should procure raw materials from the domestic economy, it is a problematic situation for those companies, because they may get those raw materials at a cheaper price from somewhere else, and they may not be happy with the quality of the raw materials that they procure in the domestic market. Because of this pricing and quality issues, they may want to opt for a foreign source. Now, in that scenario, we are tying the hands of these foreign companies from procuring the raw materials or any goods from outside. Now, this is problematic, and foreign companies won't be happy with these restrictions. Now, we are also propagating self-reliance under Atmanirbhar Bharat, which means we are not dependent on imports, and India is urging Indian companies to produce or manufacturing everything in India. This may not give a positive message to foreign companies. Now, foreign companies will want policy stability. So, foreign companies are willing to pay a premium for policy stability and barrier-free access to global trade. Now, India or the government of India should take the responsibility of convincing the investors that the environment in India will be a barrier-free access to global free trade. Only then the companies that are willing to invest in India will come forward and operate or open their manufacturing units in India, thereby increasing investments in India, leading to economic revival. In the last week's video, we discussed how the GDP contracted in the first quarter of GDP by around 23.9%. But the reality is that GDP contraction of 23.9% did not include informal sector. Now, this article discusses 4 key indicators which indicate the contraction in Indian economy. Now, the 4 key indicators are gross fixed capital formation and reduced consumer demand in urban economy, and reduced or weak FMCG demand in rural India. FMCG means fast moving consumer goods, and the contraction of growth in 8 core sectors. Now, what is gross capital fixed formation? Now, it is the value added to already fixed or constructed assets. Let's say there's a building already constructed. We are adding value to that building, like applying paint to the building, building a swimming pool or a park area. By painting the building or constructing a swimming pool, we are increasing the value or worth of the building. So this process is called gross capital fixed formation. Now this process is called gross fixed capital formation. Now this does not include the creation of new assets. It only includes the adding of value to the already constructed assets, thereby increasing their shelf life or value of the fixed assets. Now this GFCF is important because most of the developing economies heavily invest in capital assets in order to meet future demands. Now, from the past 3-4 years, this gross capital fixed formation is on constant decline. So this factor or this indicator is problematic for the revival of Indian economy. Also, there is a reduction in urban consumption. Fast moving consumer goods demand is very weak in rural economy. And in one of the previous videos, we have seen the core sectors, the contraction in core sectors because of the pandemic. Now this article discusses that these 4 indicators or the weak performance of these 4 indicators is worrisome. Now what is the way forward? How can we save Indian economy by making changes to these indicators? Now, this article states that jobs in urban India needs to be increased. Investments need to be increased in urban India. Now, government or public sector can only invest up to 24% in capital formation. So private sectors and private individuals need to invest in creation of capital assets. In rural areas, increasing disposable income may be a solution in short term, but for it to be a long term solution for the growth of rural economy is to strengthen MGNREGA and to increase jobs in the rural areas. Also, the infrastructural gaps or vulnerabilities in the core sectors, these 8 core sectors, need to be identified and rectified in order to see a growth in these 8 core sectors, which are very essential to the manufacturing sector. Also, the job creation in urban India is very important. If we can extend the MGNREGA program into the urban areas, it will be helpful in increasing jobs in urban India. Thereby, increasing these 4 indicators will help in the revival of Indian economy. Coming to the next article. Before going into the details of the article, let me explain you 2 concepts: loan moratorium and loan restructuring. We've already discussed these concepts in one of the earlier videos, but to refresh your memory, I'm dealing with that again. Now, loan moratorium is a 6-month period given by the government or the RBI during the lockdown. Now, under this loan moratorium, customers need not have to pay the loan taken by them from the banks. Let's say I have taken 1 lakh rupees loan from a particular bank. Now, during loan moratorium, I don't have to pay principal or interest during the 6 months period. it does not mean that my loan is waived off by the bank. It just means that after 6 months I need to pay the whatever amount I have taken from the bank. The loan moratorium only postpones the payment, not waiving of interest or principal amount. Now, what is loan restructuring? Now, unlike in loan moratorium, there is no window period under loan restructuring. It is just an agreement between the customer and his related bank, so that it eases the conditions in which the customer is paying or repaying the loan, like lower interest rates and lowered EMI or installments, monthly installments. That is loan restructuring. Now, when the lockdown is over, government or RBI, now after lockdown is over, RBI cannot issue loan restructuring to all the companies. So, it has decided to appoint a panel under Mr. K.V. Kamath. So, RBI has appointed K.V. Kamath panel to recognize certain specific sectors or criteria under which loan restructuring can be given to the companies. Now, this K.V. Kamath panel findings are given in this article. According to these panel recommendations, they have given a criteria, or they have given 5 key parameters using which loan restructuring can be given to the companies. The 5 key financial parameters are total outside liabilities by adjusted tangible net worth and total debt by EBITDA, current ratio, which is current assets divided by current liabilities, debt service coverage ratio, and average debt service coverage ratio. Now, you don't have to know the meaning of these individual ratios, but we need to know what these ratios intend to. Now, this total outside liabilities or adjusted tangible net worth determines the dependence of the companies on debt borrowings. For example, let's say a company needs 100 crores for its functioning. Now, this particular ratio determines how much of this 100 crores is taken by the company as borrowings. Let's say the revenue production of the company is 20 crores and 80 crores is taken by the company as borrowings for the functioning of the company. Now, this ratio determines the dependence of the company on loan borrowings. Naturally, lower the ratio, better is the performance of the company. Now, the next ratio is total debt by EBITDA. EBITDA means earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation and amortization. Now, this ratio determines the ability or the revenue produced by the company to repay its loans. How much revenue the company is earning to repay its debt is determined by this particular ratio. Now, the next 3 ratios, which is current ratio, debt service coverage ratio and average debt service coverage ratio, determines the ability of the company or the amount of revenue present with the company to repay its debt in short term. These are the 5 parameters that are issued by this panel. Now, in addition to these 5 parameters, the company should be a standard asset. The company should be a standard asset in order to qualify for the loan restructuring. What is a standard asset? If the company is promptly paying its dues or promptly paying its loans to the bank, then it is called standard asset. Now, companies under or the standard assets do not cross their due payment. Now, these standard assets do not cross 30-day limits in repaying their loans. So any company which do not cross its due payment within the period of 30 days is called standard assets, and these standard assets, the panel also specified 26 sectors which include automobiles, power, tourism, cement, chemicals, gems, jewelry, logistics, mining, manufacturing, real estate and shipping. Now this panel identifies these specific sectors and the companies under which can apply for loan restructuring. These two articles gives GDP estimates of India and the rest of the world. Let us look into detail now. Goldman Sachs rating agency has revised its GDP forecast for India from June to September. Earlier in June, it has said that GDP contraction of India will be around 11.8%. GDP contraction, not growth, but contraction will be around 11.8%. But the revised estimates which are released in September has given the GDP forecasts. But according to the revised estimates in September, GDP contraction will be around 14.8%. Now these figures are for India. Now Fitch Ratings Agency is another rating agency which forecasted its GDP forecast in this way. It said that India's GDP contraction will be around 5%. I am saying this GDP contraction, not GDP growth, and it revised its estimates to 10.5%. According to its revised estimates in September, GDP contraction for India will be 10.9%. This is GDP contraction and not GDP growth. Also, it forecasts that the contraction of GDP in emerging economies will be around 4.7% in June. According to its revised estimate in September, the GDP contraction for emerging economies. Now the GDP forecast for the United States was revised from 5.6% contraction, this is not growth, contraction of 5.6% to 4.6%. And the overall GDP contraction for the whole world is given at 4.4%, and the GDP contraction for the whole world is given at minus 4.4%. But the interesting thing here is the Fitch Rating Agency has estimated GDP growth for China, and it revised its estimates from 1.2% to 2.7%. Now this is the only country, China is the only country which has a positive growth forecast. Rest of all the nations including USA and the whole world forecasts a negative growth, which means GDP contraction. Now according to Fitch Ratings Agency, the downward contraction of India's GDP and emerging markets GDP is because of the first quarter GDP contraction of India, which was at 23.9%. Because of the huge GDP contraction in the first quarter, the ratings agency has revised downwards GDP contraction for both India and the emerging economies. And the reason given by this particular agency is India has imposed one of the strictest lockdowns in the whole of the world. Now because of the lockdown, economic activity has come down and investments has come down, and this in addition with the reduced fiscal stimulus by the government and increase in the spread of coronavirus has limited the economic activity in the country, thereby decreasing its GDP forecast. We've heard or seen in news many a times that agriculture will lead economic revival in the current situation. Now, there are arguments and counter arguments that favoring or negating the said statement. First, let us look at the favorable arguments that indicate that agriculture will lead in India's economic revival. The first argument offered was increased procurement of rabi crops. Now, it is said that when compared to the previous year, that is 2019-20, the procurement of rabi crops in the current fiscal, that is 2020-21, is 12.6% higher, which means the government procured more food crops in the current fiscal than in the previous fiscal. This indicates a positive growth. Now, the second point is food inflation. Now, we all agree that inflation is not a positive indication, but increase in food inflation means increase in sustained food demand, which is a positive indicator for the agriculture sector. Now, the third point is the area under Kharif sowing was increased when compared to the previous financial year. Now, this year 14% more area is cultivated under Kharif crops. So, this in addition to the increased sale of tractors and fertilizers indicates a growth in agriculture sector. Now, the fourth point of favoring the statement is the announcement of fiscal stimulus package for agriculture under Atmanirbhar Bharat. Now, these are all the favorable arguments which say or which states that agriculture will lead in economic revival of the country. Now, let us look at the counter arguments that says that agriculture may not be in a position to lead economic revival. The first counter argument was, yes, the procurement of rabi crops was increased when compared to the previous year, but the fact to be noted here is only 13.5% of paddy farmers sold their produce under procurement, and only 16.2% of wheat farmers sold their produce under procurement, which means more than 80% of the farmers did not sell under procurement. Instead, they sold to private players for the prices less or lower than the MSP. So, one should not look at the procurements, but we should look at the market arrivals. Now, in addition to that, there were huge losses to the milk, meat and poultry sectors. Around 25,000 crores loss was reported in poultry sector. Now, the second point, the second counter argument was food inflation. Now, the increase in prices of food is not because of demand or not because of the increased production of food materials, but instead the increase in prices is because of supply chain disruptions and increase in transportation. So, even though the food prices are increased when it comes to the market, the income is not, or the increased prices did not reflect into farmers' income. So finally, farmer has become a net buyer but not a net seller. So even though there is a food inflation, it was not a positive trend for the farmer. Now the third counter argument under Kharif sowing is that the area under Kharif sowing was definitely increased, but the reason behind the increase is different. Now during lockdown, many laborers working in the urban areas lost their employment, and those laborers migrated to their villages. Now because of unemployment, they might have taken farming which were otherwise, they might have taken farming with the lands that they were otherwise fallow or uncultivated. So, because these laborers which were otherwise unemployed took to farming, the area under kharif sowing was increased. Now let me explain by giving you an example. Let's say in a village there are two farmers A and B, and each have 1 acre each. So this was happening in 2019. Now in 2020, because of unemployment, migrant laborers returned to their villages and took to intensified farming for income security. So the income of these two farmers A and B did not rise, but the number of farmers were increased. So 4 more farmers were added to this group A, B, C, D, E and F. So even though the area under kharif sowing was increased, the income to the farmers remained the same, or there were many farmers who were still unemployed in the rural areas. According to a report by CMIE, which is Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, the number of farmers in June 2019 were around 11.4 crores, and the number of farmers in July 2019 were 11.6 crores. But the number of farmers in June 2020 were 13 crores, and the number of farmers in July 2020 were 12.6 crores. Now, the number of farmers in August 2020 were more than that of the farmers in February 2020 or August 2029. This trend indicates increase in number of farmers but not an increase in farmers' income. Now the fourth counter argument is that the stimulus package announced by the government is not sufficient. Now under Atmanirbhar Bharat package, not more than 5,000 crore was allotted to the agriculture, which is not sufficient according to this article. This article asks the government to increase MSP to around 150%. Now this article also asks the government to increase the annual income under PM Kisan scheme from the current 6,000 rupees to 12,000 rupees. Also, agriculture only contributes to 15% of gross value added. So even if agriculture growth is 4%, it only adds to 0.6% of the GVA. In order for GVA to increase full 1%, agriculture should grow at 6% per annum, which is impossible in the current situations. So government need to realize the current facts and should implement proper measures to really increase the productivity in agriculture sector. This last article indicates the increase in exports of certain spices. They are ginger, turmeric, coriander and cumin. This article states that the increase in exports of certain spices were recorded in this current financial year. Now, although the overall exports in all the commodities went down in the current fiscal year, the exports of these particular spices shot up. They are ginger, turmeric, coriander and cumin. The reason behind the increase in these specific spices is rather interesting because they were supposed to increase immunity and they were called immunity booster spices. Because of the tag of immunity booster, the exports of these particular spices has increased to the countries like US, Europe, Bangladesh, Morocco, Iran, Malaysia, China and Pakistan. And for the first time, spices export business has crossed the $3 billion mark during 2019 and 20 with 10% growth in value. Now, this is the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please go back and make note of important points that will help you in the examinations. This is Dr. Spurti signing off. Thank you. Happy studying.